web browser, get to your Google spreadsheet. By your Google Sheets, go to your Drive, choose Sheet, put in your title for your graph. In this case, it's going to be days along one side, and the other one is going to be your different solutions. You have your groups data, you have your hypertonic, your hypotonic, your isotonic. Of course, we measure mass of each, right? And then you're going to go ahead and put in your, make sure you have one for each of the groups that you're doing. Put in the mass that you collected from your group's data for each of the days. If you have a day that you didn't collect data for, then just leave it blank. Don't put a 0, because if you're putting a 0, it's going to mess with your calculations. So go ahead and put your numbers in, whatever it is that you have from your notes from the day you did the lab. And then you're going to put in the data that you got from your other groups in the classroom. Now I want to remind you that this is data I've made up. Do not try to use this data to try to graph it. Now you go ahead and I'm going to tweak the data so that the averages come out a little different than the first group's data. Reminding you that I'm making all this up. Just want to show you how to do it. So this is all the information that you should have gotten from the classroom, from the other groups. That should be all done. Okay, so finish up the tweaking here a little bit. Now we're going to do averages, and we're going to go ahead and select the averages here. Say average mass for hypertonic, average mass for hypotonic, and average mass for isotonic. We're going to put in, I'm going to take and use the formula. It's going to take me a minute to figure out how to do it on Google Sheets. Microsoft Excel does it just slightly different, in a slightly different way. But you're going to want to go here, and you're going to want to choose this average, we'll say at the top, and click it there. Now, the way you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put select average here, and then select the cell. They call them cells. They call these boxes cells, and then put a comma and select the next cell that you want to average. So that's how you're going to do it. And you'll see me do it in just a second. You want to go ahead and just keep selecting and select all three, separating each of the cells, each of the identifiers by a comma. So select, comma, and notice I'm selecting all three of the hypertonics, all three of the hypotonics, all three of the isotonics. I'm selecting the three that I'm trying to graph. It's real easy once you find the particular menu option that you need. I made a mistake near the end. You'll see me make a mistake and then go back and correct it. You have to make sure you're choosing all three. If you're going to average, you have to average all three hypertonics, all three hypotonics in that day, right? So you'll see that they're all going to be highlighted in the week, and then that'll average it out for you. And that's it. That's how you're going to do it. You're going to do it all the way across, and then we'll get into. And when I'm done, I'll double check it. You'll see me double check it. So you can see that I'm going through and I'm picking averages. I'm selecting the cells. Notice that I'm selecting all the three cells that I want to average out, and I am averaging out all the different cells. Now this is your analysis phase, right? So you're trying to see what the average is. Why are we taking the averages? We're taking the averages so that you can compare them to your group's data. If they're substantially different, then you have to ask the question, why is the average of all the group's data different than what I got? Which one is more accurate? So precision is important in our measurements. And there's always a question of which of the answers we get are more accurate, which ones are correct. Okay, and so we have to, your grade for your lab report is going to be based on your explanation, your ability to explain what you see, and is your explanation logical, not a perfect explanation. There's no one right answer. It's all about, can you explain it using the data? Your claim, is your claim supported by evidence, and is your argument logical? So you're taking your averages so that you can analyze your data and compare them. So you're going to want to graph both your group and the average in two different charts, two different graphs. Google Sheets calls them charts, okay? So now that we have that, you see that I already typed up some annotations. I'm still trying to figure this out, or was at the time I was recording this, so bear with some mistakes you might see pop up here. But you see I chose scatter plot, and I wanted to make sure that I switch the rows and columns so it comes out right. Maybe you don't have to when you do it, so just be careful. See if it looks like it's right. You notice I have to move the chart down so I can see the data, select the data so I can select another group. So I double click on the graph, and then that gets me here to this menu. I can go to customize the series, but that doesn't have what I want right now. I want to put the rest of the data on this graph, so I want to add a series. So I move this out of the way, and I can add this hypotonic. I already have hypertonic selected, and it's already graphed. And there's the hypotonic. And then when I go to and add another series, again, I'm going to have to move this out of the way. I go ahead and add isotonic. There it is. Now I have the three data series, the three series, the hyper, the hypo, and the iso. And then when I go to customize, I can go ahead and put in the titles. So I can go and add the title. And here I made a mistake, and I put the vertical axis title as a chart title. So I'm going to, you see if you notice the green on the right hand side says vertical axis title, and you'll see that on the y-axis it started to type in what I'm typing in here in the title text. That was a mistake. I didn't realize that when I was typing it in. I'll fix it in just a second in the video. But you see, this took me probably 10 minutes to figure out how to do. Now, I'm used to using spreadsheets, so it's not that difficult, but it's something that you guys are used to too with your technology, so you should be able to figure this stuff out on your own, even though it is frustrating. So, as you see, I made a mistake. I thought I was done. I didn't look, I didn't check, I didn't reflect, but then I go ahead and change the chart title to not the horizontal, not the vertical. I selected and cut it. I just put I cut that out and put it back into the title. You see that the title now is the correct title in the correct place. Now I'm putting in the X title or the horizontal title. Now I want to put in the vertical title. It's just that easy. In many ways, this is easier than Excel. Maybe some people might argue not as powerful, but it's easier than Excel. And I'm going to put in the trend lines, and there's the trend lines right there. Bam! The lines are as close to the points as possible, and you're done with your graph. So the graph can be done very quickly, even with mistakes. It took me a very short period of time to graph everything. If you do it by hand, that's fine too, as long as it's correct. Now, to annotate it, that is something it's difficult to do, and at least I don't know how to do in Google Charts. So I'm going to suggest you just put the graph in and annotate it on the bottom. If you're not drawing the graph by hand and annotating it by hand and then pasting it into your Google Doc, then go ahead and add a paragraph at the bottom. As you see, I'm trying to figure out how to get a text box on the chart itself so that I can, when I import the chart into the Google Doc, it's annotated, but I can't figure it out. I don't know how to do that. The best I can do is make a drawing and put it in the Google Sheet, but it's not easy to get it to go into the chart itself. So I end up, I think, giving up here on annotating it this way. So just annotate it with a paragraph. Once you import it into Google Sheets, just annotate it into a paragraph underneath the chart. So here we have the kind of the drawings of the text boxes I had for each of the lines, the annotations, because I want you to annotate the graph. But over here I have, let's create the Google Doc, right? And you would type up in your Google Doc, you'd go ahead and type up all the things that, all the parts of the lab report that you've been trained to deal with, which is obviously a title, whatever it is you're going to do. It's obviously osmosis and diffusion. And then you're gonna do your background, which I'm gonna hope you're gonna follow the previous video that I uploaded, and then uh, you're gonna have your experimental design, and in your experimental design you're gonna have your experimental groups, two of them, and then you're gonna have your control groups, and then you're gonna have your hypotheses, and then you're gonna have your charts, your graph, and then your analysis, right? So the analysis part obviously is taking the averages and the trend line itself. What's going on with the trend line? Trend line is not data you collected, but it is an analysis of the data. So there's a lot of analysis going on in the lab. What's happening? Well, I'm looking at the data. I'm trying to figure out what the data means. So now to go ahead and graph that data. We've graphed the data. I just showed you how to do that. How do we import that graph into this Google Sheet so that we can make use of it? Well, that's actually a lot easier since we've used a Google Sheet. Now, if you're going to use drawing, you can upload your picture of your drawing of your graph that you did by hand into your Google Docs, and you just follow the same way. You just go to your Google Drive, you go insert your Google Drive, from Google Drive, and you'll be able to insert the drawing that you have into your Google Doc as well. So anything that you have that you want to insert in your Google Doc, it's really easy to do. That is an advantage using Google Docs if you use your Google Drive. So just like I showed you to do with your notes, to turn your notes to Jupyter, you can do it here in the Google Drive. So it's in your Google Drive, you insert, you can insert a table, you can insert a drawing, you can insert a chart. Of course, we're going to want to insert, so you can see from all of these, they always have from Google Drive. Now we're going to go from Sheets, because that's part of your Google Drive. And since you've already signed into your Google Drive, it should be there. There's the last one I was using. And there it is. There's the chart we just made, and there's the chart inserted. See how easy that is? So it's really easy. And then I tried to do all kinds of things about annotating it, trying to put a text box on top of the chart, but for some reason I couldn't do it. So what I ended up doing is just copying and pasted the annotations that I made in the Google Sheets. And remember what the annotations say. They say, they're trying to explain what's going on with each line. Although usually that's not done in a professional experiment, I want you to do that so you can try to make some sense of these graphs that you've made. So I tried to do a drawing, I tried to do a text box. The only problem I had when I tried to do that, and I can't figure out how to get it to sit on top of the graph. It's easier to do in Microsoft Word and in Apple's version as well, but for some reason I can't figure out how to do that in Google Docs. So it's pretty clumsy. So what I did, and what I'm telling you to do, is to go ahead and take and put it underneath the chart. So put whatever annotations anything you want to say about any particular line, label it hypertonic, hypotonic, or isotonic. And I'm just taking and copying and pasting what I had written on the sheet, my analysis of the line on the sheet, and I'm just copying and pasting it into the Google Doc. So you can see what's happening is that initially I had it in a text box, but it was difficult for me to get it to work right. And in Microsoft Word, it's easier to work in text boxes, but in Google Docs, it's harder to work with the text boxes. So I just ended up just getting rid of the text boxes and just typing in and just pasting it and labeling each one hypertonic, keeping the font the same. You notice what I'm doing is I'm keeping it around 12 so that it's easier to read it's at least bigger than 6, right? So I want to make sure I label each one hypertonic, and then this is the isotonic explanation of the line, and anything you want to say. Again, I'm just writing something here for a demonstration, but whatever it is that you want to analyze, what you want to say about the line and what that line means to you, what sense can you make of that line? That's the analysis part, right? So this is the data that you've collected, put on a graph so you can analyze the trend, and then that's what we call the trend lines. And again, easily done with just a click of a button, which I showed you earlier. And now I just have to add the annotation for the hypotonic, which again I had done earlier in Google Sheets. It's clumsy, so I end up having to get rid of the text box. I have to get rid of that text box so I can access this text box, which had the explanation, which I had made small because I was trying to get it to to be on top of the graph, but it didn't work. So here we go. So there we have annotations. Each of the 3 lines have their comments or annotations underneath it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. And then finally, we got to do the graph of the averages, right? So that's the next step. So when we're looking at the averages and graphing it, we just have to do what we did before. One thing is you need to add a space, a line between days and hypertonic, or it's not going to work. So make sure there's a line that's blank in between, and then go up and pick create chart, and then there's a chart just like last time, except that it's a line chart, so we don't want a line chart. We want a scatter plot. And so there's your scatter plot, and we don't have to switch it this time because notice this switch rows is already chosen, right? And it had use column as header and all the rest of the stuff was already done, so I didn't have to click on it, so I didn't have to change that. However, you'll notice how the dots are pretty high up. I'm moving the chart down so I can see what the data is. Now the charts are pretty high up, the points are pretty high up, but I want to graph all of them before I start playing around with it. So we come here just like last time and pick add series, and I want to pick hypertonic or hypotonic, select all those points and script. Now if you were doing this by hand, you wouldn't have so many decimal places, but since it's a computer, the computer's doing it, I could leave the decimal places alone and just graph them as is. I don't have to worry about rounding. So there are my 3 lines. Now I want to go ahead and add a trend line, right? So I want to customize, go to series, scroll down, and there's trend line, and bam, there are my trend lines. And so that's great, but notice how much space there is underneath the lines. It's kind of, you're not using up all the space you could had you if the axes were just slightly different. So you can make some setup changes, and the way we do that is you come here to customize, and some of this I'm still I'm figuring out as I go, so you can see how quickly you could figure some of this stuff out. Never really doing anything with sheets before, so here in horizontal axes, no, I don't want the horizontal, I want the vertical axes because I want to get rid of that empty space underneath the lines. I can go to minimum and type in a number. I put 10 because there's nothing underneath 10. I could go, maybe I can change it to 14 or 15. The max I'm going to change to probably like 35 or something like that. Or 30, I could leave it alone. And I could change it to 12, right? I could make them the minimum 12. Now I also want to correct the title because for whatever reason the title says hypertonic average. I want average mass for change versus day, right? Versus days, and it's actually mass, not but whatever. And then the vertical axis, I want the horizontal axis is fine, but the vertical axis says hypertonic average. That's not true. That's not the It's the average mass is what it is, so in grams. And so there you have it. And again, you would add annotations when you get it back into Google Docs. So let's go back to the Google Doc. There it is. And notice the window was open. I can open both windows at the same time. I go to Insert, Chart, from Sheets, pick the sheet again, and I want an average mass. There's my old chart, but I want the average mass, and there it is. Just paste it. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the annotations. I'm going to explain my annotations for the graph, and what you'll see here is you'll see the average change in mass, and you'll see I'll make sure that I explain whatever it is I need to explain. Again, I'm just adding this as an example, but you're going to want to make sure that you explain what you see, right, on this graph. You want to say the hypertonic, you want to talk about the hypotonic, you want to talk about, make sure you describe what's going on with that line and why it is the way it is. Luckily, the key is already made for you by Google Sheets, so you don't have to worry about color, color coding it, etc. And I just, again, quickly threw together a little statement online. And of course, that you want to go ahead and type something up for isotonic and why you think it is the way it is. The line, explain what the line is showing, right? Here at this point with annotating a line, you want to say, what's this line showing, right? So you could go ahead and add error bars if you really wanted to. You go to series and you go to error bars and add those. And those little bars, those little whiskers, right, that they're showing you is how far away, what's the differences, right, with the data. How precise are you with your data measurements? It's doing statistical analysis and it's coming up with kind of your data range, that plus or minus that we talked about in class. That's why we use the isotonic to try to figure out what the plus or minus was with our measurements. It's really useful for the isotonic bar line. It's not that useful for the rest, but you'll notice that distance from the dot to the either above or below that dot, that's letting us know how precise we are with those measurements. So really, those error bars are pretty useful. But overall, that's pretty much all you have to do. Of course, you have to go on to your conclusion where you're going to tie it all together and make sure you're using your claim, you're using evidence to support the claim, and your reasoning is logical. And if you've done all these parts and all the parts that we discussed before, you'll do fine. All right, have a good day.